Sean Rodrigo is a London-based virtual reality artist and speaker working with innovative XR technology, such as virtual reality as a core creative tool to achieve engaging, insightful, and meaningful experiences. Over the last 12 years, Sean has worked in film, television, and advertising for brands such as MTV and Fremantle Media, with extensive experience in technical and creative brand campaigns. His current work ranges from live painting VR installation artwork to designing prototype products and VR storyboards in super fast time frames. Sometimes mixing technology with traditional tools such as augmented reality, special computing, 3D scanning, motion capture, and interactive real time. He recently visited MIT Media Labs in the US after being accepted in the world's biggest XR hackathon. And I believe I was thankfully introduced to Sean through Jenny Goldstick, one of our alumni, as well as one of our new instructors here, and very fortunate to have been introduced to him and his work through Hackathon as well. And he's instructed lectures at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology in Australia, has spoken at the British Film Institute, and is now working at University College London as associate staff and UCL 360 VR artist in residence at the School of Anthropology. Rodrigo's recent projects include commission work, teaching, and installations for Seagate, Adobe, Framestore, and Digital Catapult London. So without further ado, please welcome Sean Rodrigo.
So what I thought I would do is I sort of take you through sort of what virtual reality is and how I'm necessarily using it versus some of the things you might already understand, and then also how I got to where I am and what I'm doing at the moment with this technology. So I'll flick through. So, I mean, one of the first things that everyone always thinks of when they think about virtual reality is gaming. It's one of the biggest parts of any sort of video game or virtual sort of platform, and video games is definitely something that's really big, but virtual reality is a bit more than that. That's one of the first things people think of. The second thing they tend to think of is sci-fi fiction. It's something very forward-thinking, so obviously you get a Keanu Reeves reference in there somehow. And then the most interesting and final one is always a dystopian future where everyone is going to be force-fed, soil and green, and forced to watch episodes of Keeping Up with the Kardashians. But I don't think that's necessarily where it's all going. For me, virtual reality is very much like dreaming with your eyes open. And I say that because apart from a waking dream or a situation where you're meditating or something like that, there is no real way of being able to create a virtual world or a virtual design without in any other medium, really. With existing mediums out there, you're always sort of dependent on the real world and the influence that the real world has on you. And this technology has the ability to sort of take you into a place that's completely away from your phone. It distracts you from having to focus on what you're wearing and your physical constraints, and is sort of able to let you interface directly with the computer as though it's just your brain and the void black space where you're able to create something entirely from scratch. So to give you a little bit about an example of where I've come from, I was raised by a single mum who was very creative, who was raised in part by a very creative father. He was a painter and a graphic designer back in the days of oil and oil paints and pen and ink in graphic design, who was married to a very creative woman that is my grandmother's kitchen in Australia. So ultimately, I was a creative as well. From a very early age, I was painting, creating things from scratch, putting blocks together to make sculptures, very interested in music from a very early age. Yes, I had dreadlocks at one stage. It was a Rage Against the Machine fad. I still like Rage Against the Machine. And of course, I was always very loud and very dramatic, and a big Home Alone fan. So for as long as I can remember, I figured I was always basically doomed to be creative. I had no choice. At school, my guidance counsellor told me that there's no way I should ever become an accountant because creative accountants go to jail. And when I went to school camp, I told the school counsellors that I was lactose intolerant, for which they accommodated me with soft drink to avoid having to drink the local water, only to have my parents turn up on the last day and tell them that I was not lactose intolerant. I was just a bit of a smart ass, to be honest. So for me, it was really just something I had to embrace, and I realised that it was in my blood, and I couldn't stop myself from sort of going there. So as we've previously heard, I've been working in the creative industry for about 15 years now. 12 of those years were in film and television production. I still love film and television. It's something that I'm still actively working in, but virtual reality is this new exciting space that has given me the opportunity to do things that I otherwise wouldn't be able to do. It doesn't require an entire team of people in some cases. It has the ability to be quite optimistic in the things that are coming through every month, every year. There's new technology that's making things possible that were otherwise not possible. And it's also a really exciting place to be if you're from a non-traditional background where you don't have the education of an engineer and you want to design, or you're from a background where certain industries are more dominated by men, or places like that where this is completely new. There's a new frontier to be carved out, and the future very much is up for grabs by pretty much anyone. And because of that, the people who tend to sort of make up the body of professionals in this industry tend to be coming from very different backgrounds, and there seems to be a very little, I wouldn't say a very obvious pattern in who is coming to this world. So that's kind of how I've pivoted, if you would, into this space. Quite a few years ago now, I was working at MTV and decided to go off and make a short film. And so this is an example of some of the work that I had been doing in that job. Well, not in that job, but off the back of the experience at that job.
Welcome, my friend, to another night at Casa del Fergus. I'll be your host for this amazing evening.
Really? This place is haunted without people. It's like a creepy abandoned amusement park. Nothing amazing ever happens around here.
Correction. Nothing amazing ever happens to you.
I pack up the food court, run midnight security.
Wow, you're a man of many skills. So you're kind of like a retail superhero.
Yeah.
You're really in need of some loving? I just want to exploit her store discount. Look, bro, she's into you. Just do it for me.
Oh, it's Emilio.
Yeah, see you later, Superboy.
Ah, wait. Paper cut.
So that was a little film that got played on Comedy Central New Zealand, and it was a lot of fun about sort of embracing your inner geek and making friends no matter where you are. So that was kind of one of my favourite projects from when I was focusing mainly on film and television. And then obviously the work that I've been doing in VR, I've got a show reel here as well that sort of give you an idea. So, like as we were talking about, we sort of heard before. For me, virtual reality is very much a tool like any other tool. It is not the be-all and end-all for every circumstance. Some tools will be better in some circumstances. Some projects, and some will require a mixture of a number of different projects or mediums. So in this screen alone, I'm using examples of 3D scanning, which I've used on a number of different projects to scan real people into virtual environments, hand-painted environments in projects like for my Seagate and my Chill Blast project on the top left and bottom left. And then also using technology that's relatively new, like the Magic Leap and an application called Spatiate, which I used on the bottom right-hand corner. If you have a look over there, as coral reef. And that was used to paint this coral reef kind of in mid-air while seeing the real world. So I'm kind of agnostic when it comes to any sort of particular technology or brand. Ultimately, it's about the stories and about the design that we're trying to achieve, and trying to use the combination of different things to hack something together and make a final artwork that ultimately fills the brief and makes the customer / community happy that you're working with. So one of the things that I talk to people a lot about with virtual reality is that a lot of people get very bogged down on the features of virtual reality. You talk about pixel density ratio and screen door effect, and for me, that it could not be more boring. That's the sort of thing that is of no consequence to the work I do, and for me, that sort of stuff will only exponentially get better. And as time goes on, ultimately what we're looking at is a technology that allows you to communicate ideas really quickly and amongst other people as well. So one of the things I've been doing a lot with the clients that I work with is talking about how to paint and sketch in this spatial medium. And for those who aren't super experienced with this, this means we can basically create this artwork as though we're sculpting clay in a three-dimensional space, and then also show other people or show other people online. And that means that you're able to really use your hands. You're not sitting over a computer. My experience in the past has always been that computers were always designed in a very inhospitable way for humans, and for those two worlds to coexist, something has to give. And working in visual effects companies in the past, you'd always see sort of bays of computers and people crouched over computers in what is incredibly air-conditioned rooms. And I think that virtual reality has this ability to be able to make computing a bit more human, allow people to use their bodies as part of the sort of painting process, and really get back to what humans kind of have always done and used their bodies and their minds together, instead of being very sort of still and stuck behind the keyboard and the mouse. I've used the term tyranny of the technical in the past, and really just to sort of say that, like, the future potentially will be where computing will have a more direct, more human way of going about it, instead of being stuck behind one particular machine. So the examples for this I'll use is the New Yorker did a project with the Google Tilt Brush application I use.
Traditionally, drawing was a way of representing 3D space. To draw in 3D space is a completely different challenge. Drawing in virtual reality, we have to go back to basics.
Try that on.
I had seen some videos of the technology, but actually using it, it's a totally different world. Whoa. Oh, holy. Whoa.
When people first put it on,
That's crazy.
they start painting in front of them. But then when they start to turn and realize, like, oh, wait a second, I can be inside of my own painting? That's nuts.
Whoa.
You can walk right into it.
Woo, that's crazy. Oh my gosh.
I happen to love flatness. 2 dimensions is almost too much trouble. Making the lines for the first time, I realized I'm not drawing the illusion of 3-dimensional space. I can actually pull with my tool to make the person's arm go out.
You're circling the work and you're creating the work, but the work circling you is something unusual.
It was like you're dreaming. So it's like creating art in your dreams.
You lose sense of time, you lose sense of space, and you don't even care.
So that's one example I thought was really good, also because he hits the dreaming sort of tag as well. So what you're seeing there is this ability to be able to draw in a way that we see. You see, a lot of artists get very used to being able to interpret the 3D world into a 2D canvas. It has always been the way of doing things, but anyone who's used to sculpting will know that drawing perspective is basically forcing people to see something that isn't there. And with this technology, you're able to recreate things that feel natural every day and then put someone else in that headset and then have them have that same experience. So one of the things that I've always tried to kind of say with people is the interesting thing is learning to draw perspective is a skill. It's something that you learn over time and you get better and better at. But learning how to draw in 3D is something pretty much anyone who's ever seen a table will be able to do. They draw a table, it's a square and some legs, and everyone can do that. So this is an opportunity to be able to let people be creative, but instead of having to force them into particular types of methodology, to be able to, the technology itself is kind of more like us than, say, drawing something in a classical way. So let me just flick through to the next one. This is an example of some of the work I did for a computer manufacturer in England called Chill Blast. I did this in at a convention that they had a stall at. And I painted about a square mile of ocean with this archipelago of islands you can see, and everything's painted at I think it's about a quarter scale, and you've got people fishing and you've got people in hammocks, and you have this ability to be able to walk around it and see it at sort of 1/4 scale, or sort of standing at it above it as a god and being able to see the whole archipelago in one go. And that was really, really fun. Some of the different, with Tilt Brush, which is the application I'm using for this, everything's handmade. So everything you see is painted, with the exception of maybe the lighting conditions, is painted from hand. It comes out the end of the controller, and I just closed my eyes, sort of put my headset on, put some music on, and started painting for 4 days, which was one of the best projects I've ever got to do. So this is some of the work that I'm working on now. I can put the headset on in a second, show you. When I first moved to the UK from Australia, I'd painted a skyline in a cup of tea, and I thought as I'd come and visit the US for this talk, I would do a version with coffee and bagels instead of tea. And you know, something like this is a matter of really looking at reference material. You can bring in reference material and paint from that reference, and then walk around the coffee, look inside the coffee. But then this medium also has this ability to be able to be useful in other ways. You can hand it on to other people who are game developers. You can build a set in virtual reality and have someone playing a film in it. And there's some applications which I'm hoping to show you, technology for giving, which you can create an entire scene with cameras and lights, moving characters around and puppeting them without needing a full team and complex sort of camera equipment. This is another project I did a couple of months ago. At the event, I was lucky enough to run a workshop entitled Project Backpack VR. Now that very imaginative title was a project that we put together which incorporated virtual reality as a central component for designing of prototype plates that fit inside of backpacks. We had 2 scoliosis bags, one for a friend of mine called Jess, and we were able to scan her body, bring it into virtual reality, and then use the model of her body like a mannequin to create a plate that conformed to her body. The results are a bag that is not only aesthetically pleasing, but also really comfortable to wear. All up, our 12 participants were able to design 3 working prototypes in 6 hours, and many of those people were not from highly technical backgrounds. Now, so what that video kind of skims over there is this benefit versus features of the technology to be able to allow people who aren't professional designers to design potential solutions to problems. So with that exact example, we had this workshop, and we had a number of people who had scoliosis, which is a curvature of the spine disorder. One guy, Ben, who was fantastic, who was in a wheelchair. And he was very, very excited about the idea about being able to design his own solutions for his wheelchair with his hands instead of with a CAD program, which would take years and years to learn. So what we ended up doing there was we basically used a scale model of a friend of mine who has scoliosis, and we designed a backpack on the model in scale, and then 3D printed parts of that backpack that would allow her to be able to compensate for the shape of her back. And if you think of her back kind of in a shape like that, and then there's a flat bit for the laptop, it was able to sort of, that bit in the middle was 3D printed so that we were able to alleviate some of the pressure from a backpack on her back. And this was something that I came up with really quickly and thought, let's have a go, and it worked. Funnily enough, backpacks are fairly uncomfortable when they've got no design in them, and having a little bit of design in them was able to come up with some sort of solution. So these are the sort of things where I'm talking about, people are talking about product features versus benefits. These are the sort of benefits that I'm trying to push every day with the students that I teach, and then other artists, to try and think about how we can use this technology to do more interesting things that otherwise would be very tricky. And then also, may I add, the people who were involved with the design problems that they wanted to fix were the ones making the decisions and making the design better, which is something that tends to be lacking, because a lot of the people who are making design choices for things like disability products are themselves not disabled. So if there's a lot of push at the moment for diversity and inclusion, and part of that makes perfect sense, specifically when it comes to designing clothing, headsets, anything really for the audience. If you're, two of my assistants have quite large afro hair, and they want to design a headband that fits their hair better for virtual reality, and which I think is a great idea, because headsets obviously not designed for that particular audience. So I'll flick through one thing. This is another program that we have been using quite a lot with different clients, including storytelling clients. This is a program called Tavori. It's a program that's developed largely to be able to tell stories in VR. And the way I say is it is basically a really quick way of being able to animate a story in 3D. I teach a 12-hour course in this at University College London. And our students go from no understanding of the technology all the way to being quite competent and having a video they can take away in that space. So if you think about how much time and energy it would take to learn something like Maya, which is a very complicated program with lots of amazing features. This is not as in-depth as Maya, but still has a real potential to help people tell stories in a quick and interesting way. This program that I was just mentioning, which is not the video there, Tavori, has the ability to be able to have a lot of what they were talking about there, in the ability to move things, have a client change something, or a creative director or a director of a film or a play, make on-the-fly decisions and move things around, and you can run that off a laptop if you want to. So as with digital cinema cameras, as they came out, they sort of changed the way people looked at producing films. Before, obviously, film was expensive because it was celluloid, and now you've got digital cameras, which means that anyone can get their hands on a relatively inexpensive camera and film something. This is potentially the future of how films can sort of start planning out, blocking out, and designing future sort of narratives with relatively easily accessible machines and equipment. Now, I'm not sure what the next one is, but let me see through that. Oh, this is Tavori. This is a workshop we ran in London. Hi, my name's Sean. I'm a virtual reality artist based in London, and today we're here at the Digital Catapult to run a workshop for the amazing VR animation platform Tavori. Entirely in virtual reality, Tavori allows you to animate in real time and also in keyframe animation, and tell stories in a visual way, in a very natural way to how you're used to seeing and moving objects around in the world.
Seeing how simply something can be made with Tavori really makes it open to people who haven't got the technical skills and have the ideas that they want to execute, which has been really good.
When I've tried Tavori, I've been really inspired because it's an artist's tool. I A keyboard and a mouse does not feel like an artist's tool. But once you try it, it's really hard not to have a revelation.
So don't worry, I will show you how that application works. But that's a good example of how people, at the very top of the industry are approaching these tools. And these are available on online stores for about $20 US to start with. That's what we're looking at once you've got the hardware. So that's pretty much the bulk of what I wanted to talk to you about today. But I also thought what I'll do is I'll show you through two different examples of the work that I've been doing. One is tilt brush, is the painting medium, and the New York in a Coffee artwork that I did specifically for today. And then the other one, if I can get it working, because my machine's being a little temperamental today, is the Tavori platform, which I can really show you how we can set up a really simple scene, shoot something, animate it, and then do all the components of what is a traditional film set largely inside of the computer with one person operating it, which is very exciting. And you saw some of the motion capture components of the application, which is something that they're developing at the moment, which is very exciting because it means that you have the ability to be able to do motion capture for things like games. You could do a character for a play and put that up on the screen, have an actor sort of pre-record that if you wanted to, or even live. There are examples of that being done right now with the Royal Shakespeare Company in London for The Tempest, and they have a motion capture Tempest, which is very exciting. So on the highest end of production, all the way down to students, people are using this technology. But as things go kind of more and more approachable, there's no reason why every film school and every performing arts school should have access to some of this technology. So, cool. You want me to jump in? I'll see if I can jump into it. Everyone cross your fingers, because it's one of those things where I feel like the computers are a bit, what do they call it? A bit shy, and it knows when it's going to be on camera, and because of that, it tends to not work. I've got over my my shyness when it comes to talking in public, but my laptop's still new and it's still getting there. So, yeah, cool. So what you can see here is tilt brush. So that's a good sign. Generally, if you're not familiar with how this works, the sensors that we've got set up now are sort of telling the headset the position of the headset in 3D space. So as I move forward, it moves forward. Now, that's actually quite a dark scene, so that's not really going to help my case explaining it. But I can see my controllers on the floor, which is very promising. And I shouldn't have said anything about it not working because he wouldn't have known any different. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you, show you what I was working on before, and maybe also the archipelago painting. I'm just going to strap my brain into it a little harder. And what you can see here is, can you see what I'm saying? Yeah? Okay, cool. All right. So what you're seeing now is the painting process that I actually gone through to get to the. Obviously, I painted the floor very thoroughly, and it actually records the brush strokes as I'm done them. Oh, there we go. I'm going to move it around here. And I think I was kind of sort of quietly wishing that I had gone with a country with less stars in their flag, because I was like, oh God, it's going to be much easier if it was Turkey with one star, but it's all right, you guys didn't do it. It is an older one. All right, so I'm going to skip forward because it's going to take a while because I think that I painted that. And there we have it. But what I was able to do is I was able to sort of paint the stars and then duplicate them. I just had to keep looking at the reference. So what you can see here is everything here is pretty much painted from scratch. So if I go onto my palette and I pick a color, and then I pick a brush, I'm able to sort of adjust that brush and paint in midair if I want to. So I'm just going to go back and I'll pick one that's a little different, and I'm able to do that. If I want to sign the painting, I can scale it up and I can go like that. Or I can kind of go into here and I can grab one of these bagels and I can pick it up And take a bite? No, I can't do that. I'm just kidding. I wish I could though. Bagels are really good. I like them here. And then if I want to, I can duplicate that and I can add an extra little bagel down here if I want to. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to give it, is New York bagels are more, I'm sorry, New York bagels are kind of plain, are they? You kind of have all sorts of different ones. I had a bagel this morning and they offered me about 600 different varieties and I just was like, the second one, please. I was like, yeah, too many things on a bagel. I saw a thing actually. Sorry, this is completely independent of the talk. But I saw something the other day, which was a Krispy Kreme donut with a fried chicken slice inside of it, which I'm sure will probably kill you. But yeah, God bless America. So what you can do here is you can kind of go in, and you can add kind of seeds to it if you want to. Maybe that's too big, so I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the medium. But as I mentioned before, like this is as much of a sketching medium as anything else is. So I'm kind of going in, giving it some sort of poppy seeds. And how I made these designs here was that you've got these really trusty little guides which you can pick up and customize. So I think that's the World Trade Center. Now, is that a blue? I want to say that's blue. It's blue, unless anyone else says it's not. And then I'm just going to change the brush back down to a marker, and then I'm going to paint it, give it a nice blue. Okay, and then I think this is meant to be the Empire State Building, which I remember it being kind of like a gold or copper colour. At least it is in my painting now. Sorry for changing your national icons to different colours, but you know, you threw our tea in the water, so you know, lots of English people aren't happy about that. Okay, so it's. Yeah. All right, so obviously you can go in. You can also pull in reference images. So over here I've got a Statue of Liberty reference. So there you go, that's not too bad. And I've noticed that she's got a bit of a gold flame in there. So it's not too bad, if I may say so myself. And then if you don't want it, you can throw it away. I like that, that's my favourite part. Go away. And then I've forgotten what building that was meant to be. It's very sketchy, but I'm going to say it's the Chrysler Building, and I don't remember what colour the Chrysler Building is. But let's see if this works. Desktop. This is one of my favourite things at the moment. Chrysler Building. Oh, what's wrong? Oh, was it? I don't know. I think that's the Statue of Liberty. That was the Empire State Building. And then I can go in. I'm assuming you guys can see what I'm doing, right? Yeah. So it's a grey colour. It's a grey colour. And I can save that into the headset as well if I want to, but I'm not going to for now. I'm just going to pull you back up into thing. And we're going to give it a grey colour. Nice grey. So that's a nice setting that I can just say the word and it will pop back up. Oop. Now, obviously, as I'm doing this live in front of you, I'm trying not to do anything too silly, but you can obviously go in and you can do more granular detail. I believe this is the Guggenheim. I'm just going to colour that in. I think that's a white colour. And as we were talking about before, you know, you can, once you've done this, you can walk around it. I'm sort of standing in one spot and painting, just because I'm in front of all you guys. But you can, once you set it up in the space, now I can see that there's a square here, which is what I was doing when you first came in. It was sort of setting up the room. And I can kind of walk up to the bagels, go, this bagel here needs to be smaller and fatter. So I can go in and I can select it, and then I can make it smaller like that. I'm going to select the bagel, and I'm going to make it fatter. Oh, too fat. Make it fatter. So this is what I'm saying. Everyone always has always had, like, a lot of people have clients who want to make changes on the fly, and this is one of those things where you really can kind of go in and make changes on the fly. Then I'm going to go kind of save it, and then you can go through and take pictures. So I'm going to go in and take a nice picture like that. You can't quite take selfies yet. That would be nice, but you can't do it. Hold on. Can you see it? No, you can't. Ah, damn. We're working on that. That's the future. So there's a GIF, and then we're going to kind of go through. So if you remember what Steven Spielberg was doing before with the virtual camera, this is not too far off from that. You've got the camera in the scene. It doesn't have camera zoom lenses, but it does have the ability to be able to see the framing. So we've saved that. You can see over here that I've cheated and I've painted the stars, and then I duplicated them onto the map, but onto the flag. But you do have a lot of stars on that thing, and it took me a very long time to get them on there. So I just didn't want to get chased out of New York by patriotic people. That's all. All right. So I'll show you my archipelago while we're at it. This is the one I was talking about before, which was the series of islands. Oh, this is an early version from the looks of it, because let me see if there's an older version. No, this is the earlier version. So what I did here is you can kind of see that you've got this square mile of ocean, and I've literally just gone on in with one of the guides, and if I just sample that, you've got this thick media brush, and you're able to sort of paint more ocean if you want. And then in here, I've made this island with a volcanic island. I quite like the idea that these little men that are kind of in this scene are kind of completely unaware that their island is about to explode. And this guy's having a bit of a fish, and it's somewhere in the Caribbean. I mean, people are pretty relaxed around there. So this guy's got a little goatee. So I think he's about that big in the scene. And this is where, this is the fun part about it, is you can kind of walk around like you're in the scene, and I can kind of, I'm just going to move it over here, go in, pick up the coconuts, and I'm just going to duplicate them, give it more coconuts, the scene.
How is the water animating?
Well, what happens is the brushes that you can choose have different properties. So some of the brushes have animation and some of them don't. So if I wanted to add fire, let's go up here and make them, thank you, Jenny. I want to make this tree on fire. You can just do that. Now, what you can do is just walk around and do that, and then they sort of animate on the spot. Thanks for lighting my tree on fire, Jenny. No, I'm kidding. So yeah, there's lots of the water here is this is actually a stroke brush. I'm just trying to see what it's actually called. I think it's called. Yeah, I don't know. There's lots of different ones in here. But what I've done here is I've used different combinations of brushes to get different results. So if I wanted to make a new island, I could go over here and just start painting a new island. And this is called the hull brush. It's a sort of a geometry brush. Funnily enough, you actually can 3D print anything that you make with this brush, because it creates a sort of watertight geometry that's really good for 3D printing. So one of my assistants has actually made a necklace, and we're hoping to sort of 3D print and then make a version in resin, which will be actually quite fun. So you make that, and then if you want to go in, I generally kind of look at some of the brushes and I think about what this sort of look like. So this one, if you make it brown, kind of looks like tree. It looks like a wooden sort of tree. I suppose that's what all trees are made out of. And then this one, petals, if you make it green or make it kind of a brown, kind of looks a bit like palm trees. So as I was saying, you know, like every part of this island has been, now I've just made this island enormous because I wasn't paying any attention to the scale, but you can go through and every section kind of needs more details. And if you've got more time on your hands than I do today, you can go through and make all the grass really small and kind of give it like that. And then you go in and add detail as you go along.
Can I ask more questions?
Of course you can.
Can you dupe entire groupings of objects? Like, could you dupe that entire little island that you just made? Or like how does it?
Yeah, you can. So what I'm doing here is I'm selecting everything. And it's going. Oh, okay. Yes. Sorry, Jenny. You're getting in trouble. So I just selected it, and then I'm able to duplicate it like that if I want to. So yes, that's another way of doing it. So this is really cool because say for instance this is a augmented reality video game, what you might do is you might delete all the water, and then the islands will just sit in your living room floor, and you could create a sketch model of these sort of environments, game levels. A lot of people like to sort of get like a marker or something like that, make it white, and then level 1, and then arrows to the next level 2, and then 3 is here, 5, 4, and this is a really good way of scamping that up. Now, if you're familiar with anything like Unity or Unreal, a lot of the assets that you create in these applications can be used in those game engines, and therefore actually being used as a game asset. There are importers for those, so you can create these assets kind of by hand, and there are a number of applications out there at the moment that are actually using tilt brush and quill animations kind of in the actual game. So this is the sort of the speed in which you're able to work, and then I can put someone else in this headset and they can go, oh yeah, there's a volcanic island, I get the feeling. And there's also atmospheric effects, so you can add more fog or less fog. Let's go to less fog. More fog, less fog. And then as you get closer to the ground, there's actually less fog. So I'm going to sort of sit on the ship and look around. Oh, Kraken. And then you can also be sort of a god size and make, look down and everything. Funnily enough, I've actually used this example, well, not this example, but this idea of a square mile of ocean as a reference for a client that works with Navy, and they've actually put battleships in sort of like a field and done reconnaissance missions and sort of rescue missions using my sketch, and sort of kind of planned out what they might do in a certain circumstance. So it's actually very cool and fun in that respect. You have any more questions? I'll flick through to there. Of course, yes. Sorry, I couldn't see you, but I can now. 1 second, sorry.
Very simplistic question, perhaps.
Sure. No.
Does your headset require that the artist have vision in both eyes? I have no vision in one eye and low vision in the other. So
the headset is stereoscopic, so you're not going to get stereoscopic vision if you only have one. But I'm assuming that's kind of what you see every day. Is that right?
So I once had binary vision,
yes.
but I no longer.
It shouldn't be any different to how you're normally.
I was not blind from birth. I'm now legally blind.
Okay.
And I'm looking for tools to continue to work in a creative way.
I mean, I can't tell you for sure because everyone's experience is different, but you will get a consistent experience to what you currently have with the regular world. So it's not going to be worse than what you're seeing now. But
what I'm really concerned is not so much what I see, but what I learn to create for others.
Okay. Well,
because I compensate all the time with my visual memory.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, if you've got a good muscle memory and you can move, you can draw something from relatively knowing where the space is, then it might be actually really good for you. Vision is one of those things that's very different for everyone. So it depends really. You might love it, you might not love it. It depends really.
I'm also looking for tools to explain visual space to others who have never seen.
Yeah.
That's become a kind of an
that's-
issue and a problem for
That's
me.
quite interesting. There's a growing field of haptics, which could potentially, if you were to work with something like Tilt Brush to draw something out and then have that interpreted through haptics, potentially you could have people feel the illustrations that you're designing. That's not something that's out of the box, but I think it might be a good way of having a look at it.
Thank you. I mean, obviously, that's a very specialized question.
No, it's fine.
Thank you.
The headset will give you the same experience whether or not you can see with one or two or both eyes. It's just going to be really whether or not it does what it wants for you. But yeah. But maybe what I'll do is I'll show you some of the work that we've been doing with Tavori. So the Tavori is this application. It's dependent on other applications like Steam, which sometimes are temperamental. But this application is the one that I was mentioning of, which has cameras, it has lights, and you're able to really bring in different assets and animate them in a 3D scene. So you bring in these sort of monitors. You can control the light in the position of the day or night. And you're really able to animate characters in real time, which means you're able to grab the hands of the character like they're doing now, and then animate or record that animation. So see, what you're seeing now is you're actually seeing someone standing behind the character and animating the hands so that when you watch the scene back, it's kind of recorded the human element. So you're animating lights there with colours, giving it a bit of a disco look. And this is the final sort of scene that they've made here. Yeah, so and that ultimately for me, that application is really amazing for things like planning out stories using VR, and it's being used a lot by people to do concepts, really quick pitches into their producers or their clients. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, this is super exciting, and I want to try and do as much as I can with it over the next couple of years as the technology matures. But yeah, it's pretty much all I had for you today. Do you have any more questions? Yeah? Oh, Jenny? Yeah.
Okay, so with the animation software?
Yes.
Is there any, I noticed that with Gravity Sketch and Tilt Brush and stuff, there's a lot of similarities to Photoshop or Illustrator, it was very intuitive.
Yep.
Would you say that, is it called Tavori? The animation?
Tavori, yeah.
Okay, is there any I don't know how you say it, tweening mechanic, you know how in Flash you would tween stuff? Is it anything like that, or is it totally reliant on you moving the object?
No. So this is why I'm trying. I'd love to get awkwardly trying to get the Steam to behave with me today. It's just one of those things where I'm just going to restart the machine. I really want to show you how it works. It basically does have that tween effect to it. You can set a keyframe and then an end frame, and then it animates between the two scenes. So I'm just going to kick it back up. And yeah, sorry.
Like, can you record a performance in real time though? There are, like, After Effects, there are some capabilities of recording essentially the naturalistic whatever of the mouse.
Just a natural movement, human movement?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
That's very cool.
So you can do one of two things. One, the first and easiest thing to do is using the controllers to be able to move the hands or the head. You can move two objects at the same time. So, you know, the head and the hips. A lot of people like to make characters dance. That's generally the first thing they'll do. But then also there is an experimental build, which is not public yet, but I've been using in the lab at UCL, which involves using 6 Vive trackers or Vive pucks, which is not too dissimilar to the controllers that you have on the Vive. And ultimately, you're able to assign a different part of the character to those trackers, and then you're able to have people dance around. Let me see if I can find... I've got a version of, we do some motion capture as part of a class that I teach, that your animation class. I do have, let me see if I've got it. So I'm kind of improving a little bit here. Oh, here we go. So this is a really quick render of the motion capture process that we did with Tavori on that one class. You can see, so this is a person with all the trackers on them, and they were able to sort of walk around the scene. And we've replaced the head with a fire effect because as the character trails off. There is another version. Oh, here we go. Here. So this is Hermione, one of our PhD students, and this is her dancing around in the classroom. It looks a lot cooler there than it does in real person, and sort of in real life. You have a tendency to look a bit crazy, but it's okay because it's all in the name of art. So what we're actually doing here is you can see the camera's moving, and that's because I'm actually moving the camera at the same time. So you've got 6 degrees of freedom tracking on a human being, and then you've also got the camera to be able to move as well. So I'm working on this idea of trying to create some sort of 2-person tango. Where we've got multiple people all moving around the space and also a live camera operator. A lot of the time what we're doing when we're using these programs is we're using them for early stage development, not something that is full production. But because of the fact that it's real time, so to give you an idea, anything VR related is generally about 8 times more intensive on a graphics processor than in the traditional sort of Photoshop or Illustrator. So because of that, you're rendering sort of what is 4K footage in real time, and because of that, you don't end up with textures, you don't end up with sort of ray tracing or anything like that, because at the current sort of rate of how things are working, that's just way too intensive on the computers. So facial animation is something that a lot of people are kind of moving towards, and I think that there's a couple of people that have done it. There's an animator in the US called Jeremy who has animated an entire 15-minute short film in Tavori with characters with multiple wing sets and face, eye movement and all that sort of stuff. Potentially the new HTC Vive, which has eye tracking in it, potentially could be a cool way of being able to add eye movements to characters.
So I come from partly a philosophy background, and I think a lot about and along with storytelling. So one thing I'm always really curious about, and I'm just wondering as an aside, if you've kind of observed, given a lot of demonstrating how we can use these tools and how it can totally transform the creative process, which looks amazing. But I'm also wondering if it in any way, that process kind of affects, ooh, that sounded promising.
That's a horrible noise, isn't it? Sorry.
How it affects kind of how you think creatively, or the ideas that you have, if that's in any way broadened or kind of more focused as just kind of a result of working in such a different kind of creative space.
Well, I mean, to give you an idea, in the past, I wasn't an illustrator, I wasn't a designer, I was a filmmaker. I generally would write scripts and hand them to other people who'd make, who'd shoot them. And I think most of that was just brought up on the idea that I had to have those people help me with things because you just can't make a film on your own. So when this came along, the idea of trying to tackle something and do a lot of the work, the lighting, the texturing, the modeling, the animation, all that sort of stuff, it seems a lot more doable. And it ultimately, like, one of the things I thought was quite interesting, and I think it's sort of been backed up by other people who worked in the industry, is that this particular medium has this ability to make you feel like realize that you are more creative inside, I think. Because whilst everyone thinks that it kind of makes you less human because you spend all your time inside of a computer, it actually kind of isolates you down into what core ultimately is you, which is your brain. This is not you. What's you is inside and your personality. What I've realised is that there's a lot of stuff that I want to make that just comes out of me. I don't really need to necessarily think about it. So the hope is that in the future, people will be able to kind of use it as almost like a form of like art therapy in a way, which is really fun, and it's very relaxing too. Like they said, in that video that I showed you, they use it and people kind of lose themselves a little bit in it, if that makes sense. So just to take you back to where we were talking about before, if I'm just going to pull up a completely new scene here. And as what I was saying before is that you get this completely empty space. There's nothing. I can't see you. I can't see my clothes. I can't see my hands. It's just zeroing down into what is basically my head and the world. So everything's pretty much empty. Then, if you want to start bringing in things, you can open up the scene. You can bring in an assets folder, or sort of they call this the content shelf. I want to say, shelf. Yep, and then you've got a monitor, and then you've got the sun. So what I always like to do is kind of make it nice and dark and dramatic. And then on this shelf, you've got the ability to be able to bring in characters. So I'm going to bring in just a generic female character, and you just saw how pull it in. You bring it in by just pulling it into the scene. And then I'm going to go to the packs section, which has lots of different assets. So we're in New York. So let's bring in some buildings. That's a bit. Well, let's not go. Let's pretend we're not in New York. Let's say we're in London. Just because it's my current hometown. So let's do that. New York buildings. Subway. And then, in order to make things smaller, you can kind of click with 2 fingers, and you can put a bench in the scene. And then we can grab a TARDIS. Well, it's a phone booth, but it's a TARDIS. And we can just put in another object in there. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the tools section, and we're going to pull in a camera. And I'm going to go to a nice sort of mid shot there with the character. We'll pull in a light. And on the light, you can flood or spot the character. So I'm just going to kind of do that. So I like to, part of the courses that I teach, we do a 3-point lighting class. And you can take the light and you can make it dimmer. So I'm just going to do that. Oh. I'll throw that light away and get a new one. So we can make it dimmer and going to make it kind of a cold green color. That's not good, is it? Nice blue. And then we'll do a fill over here, and we'll give that a nice yellow light. And then we're going to do a backlight right there. Make it smaller, and I'll give that a nice yellowy glow, pointing at the back of the head of the character. And now you've got your scene in there with the camera. Now we were talking about real-time animation or tweening. Is that the idea? So you can do a couple of things. You can take the character. What I'll do is I'll animate the character in real time, and then I'll animate the camera. So I'm going to grab her hips and set her down by grabbing her hands, putting hands on the. Yeah, and we're going to reenact Forrest Gump. So we're going to start off on Life is Like a Box of Chocolates. And then we're going to go to, if we go to the key, to the monitor, you'll see that there's a recording button. And then you can go real-time animation or keyframe animation. Now, keyframe animation is interesting because you can just set the recording position, it's a start position. Let's scroll forward in time, and then I'm going to take it back to there, to a wide shot, and then move it back to start and hit play, and it's going to in between those two positions. So to do something like this in Maya would probably take you about 5 minutes, and I think about 100 different buttons to press, basically. Now, not to say that Maya isn't still useful. Maya is definitely useful, but if you're doing something like a pitch and all you want to do is show a camera movement like this is going to save you a lot of money and make everyone very happy. So the other thing that we can do from here is this is going to pause that, stop the recording. We're going to go into our character. Now, what I like to do is we use the advantage of the spatial side of things and sort of stand in her position and grab her hands, and then I'm going to tell it to record in real-time animation, and as soon as I pick up the hands, you can just wave like that, and then if I scroll back to the start, you'll see that the character waves. So that's a really, really easy way of doing it, but then also what you can do from there is you can do different iterations of that. You can, let's go back to the chord start, you grab the head, and then you've got this scene. If you don't like the way that the camera is moving, you can turn the recording off and touch the actual camera, and you'll see the keyframes come out. Oh, let's go to the camera. And then you'll see that there are keyframes here, and you can change those keyframes to by moving them forward or back. And then you can also animate cameras if you want to. You can put in a car and animate a car to the scene. So let's go into tools. No, let's go into packs, and we'll grab a car, and we'll put the car in the back of the scene here. And what you can do is you can make the moves have a bit more precision by turning on snapping or the gizmo tool. And the gizmo tool basically gives you the ability to move things on an axis, make things bigger or smaller. So you can see a car go past in the back. But let's start the car there, keyframe animation, make sure the car stands there, and then as the car moves back, as this camera moves back, we're going to move the car over onto there. Hopefully I'm not poking someone in the face. Okay, so in the back, what you'll see is, as we do this, you'll see the car fly past really quickly. Yeah. All right, so well, not so quickly. So let's move the keyframes together a little quicker, and then you'll see as we animate, the car goes past quicker. Now, what we can do is, if we want to say, we go, oh, well, that's really cool, but we want to see what the person in the car is seeing, you can go into, I'm going to turn off the recording, I'll go into the tools, I'm going to put a camera inside the car, we're going to go into the car, and you're going to pick this position, and then what we can do is we can go in and we can link the car to the camera. And now, if we go to the first position, you can see the car going past. But then also, if you go back to the start, hit this camera, and you can see the position of the driver as well. So, and then on top of all of that, you can also stick in a 360 camera, which will give you a whole perspective, an entire 360 degrees a render of what you've just done. Now, if you wanted to say, for instance, turn this camera into a 360 camera, you just turn it into a 360 camera. And now what you're actually doing is you're actually moving a person back in 3 degrees of freedom, which is very, very cool. You can also go in and you can repaint. You can repaint some of the elements, so repaint the ground green. Let's repaint that car blue. And this is all in real time. So, you know, like basically, as we're doing this, the client can decide they want something different. Now, the last, and I mean, there's plenty more things that we can do from here, but we can also take one of these little men over here, and if you see, we place them in the middle of the scene here, you'll see that as they wave, they're waving the same way that I'm waving. And what that does is that's actually a first-person experience camera, and that means that if I hit the play button on my thumb, I'm actually getting a 6 degrees of freedom version when I can walk around and investigate the scene. Now, the coolest thing about that is Tavori have just released the ability to be able to export that scene, that camera that you just showed, as an EXE file, which means anyone with the VR headset can put the headset on, boot up Steam, which will work first time, and you'll be able to see that scene that I've just animated without needing any additional software. So you can basically create an experience, a set, a roller coaster in this application, and then export it out and give someone that to watch on their computer if they want to as well. So yeah, there's lots of cool things with that. Is there any questions before I put something up? Of course, yeah.
Another naive question.
No naive questions. It's all everyone's naive at the moment.
How much computing power is this all taking? How
Lots.
memory? How fast a processor? What are you running this with?
Lots. Basically, what you will need a graphics card, which is it's a GTX 1060, 6 gig or higher, which generally means you're going to have to spend about $1,200 US for a computer. Anything above that, you'll end up with a better computer.
If you're as old as I am, that's really nothing, because it used to be that something that did practically nothing cost $3,000.
Exactly. So my laptop over here is about £1,600, and that's a top of the range laptop. If you were to purchase a headset, you can get them for about £300 or $300 US. I think it's about the same. And then there are new headsets coming out that are without the computer, but those will be fairly limited. You can do Tilt Brush, which I showed you before, but you can't do this program at its current version. Now I'm just trying to see if there's anything else in here. There's lots of student work, so I'm just trying to find anything that's my own. Oh, this is one of the default scenes. So let's just pull up one of the default scenes. Problem, go away. I wish I could do that in real life, right? When a problem comes along, you just throw it away. So this is one of the examples of one of the scenes that they've made with this sort of campfire. And a lot of these assets are being built into Tavori, but you can also do something where you can pull in assets off Google Poly, which is a free library, and you can do things like this where you can type in the words. I'm doing this for Jenny because I just assume she has lots of cats. Sorry, Jenny. Yeah. I'm a little bit right? No. Anyway, if you have a working internet connection, which we don't seem to be having today, it'll pull up models of cats and you'll just be able to pull them into the scene and you can have a cat animating around. So you don't have to be building everything from scratch. You can be pulling in assets from the existing store, which they have, which is all free, or you can pull in assets that you got off the internet, or you can pull in something like a cat off Google Poly. And then you can also save them all to Google Poly and then watch back the scenes on the internet without needing a VR headset.
Back to your observation about going into this with, the feeling like, oh, I can create all these things without having this massive production going on. Obviously, Steven Spielberg, I'm imagining, I've never worked with him, he's not going to do anything that doesn't have less production, but in general, do you feel like this area has less, post, the whole, everything that happens to get a production out that is, I don't want to say Steven Spielberg's production, but if you compare that to film or TV.
So is the question,
just
is this, sorry.
Do you feel like that this observation that you had going into VR, that you could do all of these things yourself as an artist without having these teams of people around, does that hold true in terms of don't
get me wrong, I don't want to be one of these people that are the world is your oyster. Go along and make everything. You're the next Spielberg because of using a laptop. No, that's not true. What I am saying to people, though, is before, when you wanted to get an idea out on film, it was draw it on pen and paper and write a script and then hope someone will pity you and give you a roll of Super 8 or 35 or whatever it is, right? Or you have to go to a film school that has those things. When I went to school in Australia, getting film developed was something you had to send it to Texas to get developed. So because no one in Australia develops film anymore, apart from maybe the people at the very, very top who are doing it not for nothing. So for me, it's not as much about this being a replacement for any production tool. It's definitely not. It sort of slips into the kind of in-between sections. So for a first-time director who wants to prove that their idea is going to be fantastic, you could make an animatic in this. Now, animatics are not ever considered to have to be final pieces of artwork. A lot of the people, I've got some friends who work at a company called The Third Floor who do a lot of pre-visualization for a lot of big, enormous films. And half the time the Hulk looks like a bunch of grey masses smashing someone into the ground. But what they're really looking at is they're looking at the way the character is hitting the ground. Is that correct? So what I would say is it's definitely somewhere that you can make stuff. I think the biggest issue for creatives, and myself included, is there's this obstacle of, yeah, I've got this idea, but then how do I get it actually made? With this, like, you just watch me do a little scene. I've got a short film that I want to make in the next couple of months. It's about a robbery that takes place in a fish and chip shop, and I'm going to do the whole thing in VR before we shoot it at all. And in my DOP's like, we need a crane. I'm like, show me I need a crane. And then if the shot looks amazing in Tavori, I'm going to go off and we're going to get a crane. But that's where those conversations can be happening. You can be having that, do we need a crane? Do we need a dolly? Does it need to be a Steadicam? And you can prototype it without needing, needing any sort of actual equipment, which is really cool. And there are plenty of other applications out there that will do it, like you were saying, character animation applications as well. But I really do feel like moving something with your hands is a lot nicer than doing it with keyframes I've used After Effects professionally for 10 years, so I'm totally used to that. But I don't prefer it. I definitely not. So yeah, I know it sounds like a soft answer, but it's basically it's not going to replace anything. It's not going to come along and I don't know if you remember when Final Fantasy the film came out and everyone was like, oh my god, actors are going to be obsolete. No, not really. But if you're talking about video game cutscenes, then that's a different thing. You know what I mean? So yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.